Hey, it's Adam, and in this video I'm going to talk about why mindfulness meditation is absolutely essential for you if you're interested in discovering the true nature of reality. Now, in this video, I'd like to claim that reality is a certain way. There's a certain way that reality is. And I'd like to make the claim that in order to discover however way reality is, you have to do it for yourself in your direct experience. You can't rely on science to use the technology and the microscopes to go into and look at atoms and physics and all that stuff to then tell you how reality is. That is not a very effective way to go about investigating the true nature of reality. And the reason is because reality can't be put into a symbol. The true nature of reality can't be symbolized. It can't be measured. It can't be logically deduced. And the reason why is because logic is a second order phenomena, meaning that logic, your ability to be reasonable, your ability to rationally, philosophically figure out what reality is, that whole process of logic is grounded upon and relies on the experience of being and the experience of the present moment. So this is being right here. This is the first order phenomena. And then logic is grounded upon the fact of experience. Because without this present moment existing the way that it is, there is no logic. You can't use your logic. So that's why in this video, I'd like to talk about mindfulness meditation. Because mindfulness meditation is the practice of observing reality directly at the being level. So if you're interested in truth, if you're interested in discovering the true nature of reality for yourself, because this true nature of reality, just imagine that reality is a certain way. This is my tentative hypothesis for this video. If you can imagine that reality is a certain way, I'd like to claim that the only way that you can discover that is through the direct observation of being, the direct looking at and observing and investigating the present moment. So if you haven't noticed already, the present moment, this moment here, this one, not some other one, this moment here, that's the only thing that you have of reality. That is the closest to reality. That's the closest to truth that you're ever going to get. If you become conscious right now of your present experience, however it's occurring right now, let's say that this is true. You can't dispute the way that the fact of being, the fact that reality exists, that is indisputable. The fact that there are experiences happening, there are phenomena, just that fact, that's the closest to reality that we can get. So why would anyone want to discover the true nature of reality? And to be honest, I don't really know why, because discovering the true nature of reality goes directly against your selfish agenda. Because believe it or not, the true nature of reality is not something that you are going to like. It's not something that's going to serve you as a self. What if the way reality is, in order to discover it, you have to put aside your selfish wants and the way that you want reality to be? So with me to guide me on this, this little rant that I'm doing, this isn't scripted at all, I have some quotes that I'm going to use to help support what I'm saying. And the books that I've chosen are the Bhagavad Gita, it's like a couple thousand-year-old spiritual text, and also the Dhammapada, which is the Buddhist text, one of the most famous Buddhist texts. So let's get into it right now. The Bhagavad Gita in chapter 6, in this chapter is all about the practice of meditation and why it's absolutely essential if you're interested in glimpsing what reality actually is. Not what you think reality is, not what some other person told you what reality is, but to actually see how reality actually is, in truth, in fact, in like, what is the case? How is it? Now, the Bhagavad Gita says, the supreme reality stands revealed in the consciousness of those who have conquered themselves. They live in peace, alike in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, praise and blame. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. And this is only 2 sentences, which is why I love reading these spiritual texts. So the supreme reality, the highest reality, the most true reality, reality is even capitalized with an R, stands revealed in the consciousness of those who have conquered themselves. Now, you can basically, every single spiritual text is trying to tell you this one sentence in a million different ways. The theme of all spirituality is that once you go beyond your own selfish tendencies, you as a self, you as an ego, as a conceptual construction, you want reality to be a certain way. And there are certain ideologies, certain belief systems that support your existence as a self. Even very fundamental things, very fundamental ways that you think reality functions, even these things like space, like time, like the existence of your body, like the existence of evolution, like the existence of science, the existence of the earth. This is all context, and this is all concept. And concept, as we spoke about, is second order to being. Being is the closest you're going to get to the true nature of reality. Right when you start thinking about reality, right when you start conceptualizing and philosophizing about reality, we've already gone too far and we've already strayed away from observing and glimpsing its true nature. Because as the Gita says, the supreme reality can only be glimpsed and only be grasped in your direct experience, in your direct consciousness. And why is this the case? Because if you haven't noticed, your direct experience and your consciousness is all that exists. That's why mindfulness meditation is absolutely essential, and almost all of the Eastern spiritual texts, and even the Western spirituality, which is mainly Christianity, even these, if you go and you look into the more like Christian mysticism and you go into the more hardcore versions of Christianity and Judaism, then you'll see that they put a very, very high priority on meditation. Now, the reason why this is the case is because meditation is the act, the practice of observing the present moment as it is, not as you think it is. So when we do mindfulness meditation, what we're doing is we're actually just bringing our awareness to the present moment, and we're detaching from thoughts. So whenever you're thinking during a mindfulness meditation session, your job as the meditator is to detach your awareness from the content of the thought and just to observe the thought impartially. Now, once we're able to do that very well, it might take you a couple thousand hours to get very proficient at doing this well. But once you're able to separate your thoughts from your awareness and you're able to just be aware of things without having to think about and conceptualize about them, now we are a lot closer to glimpsing the supreme reality, the true nature of reality. So I always do this in my videos. I always grab random objects that are around me so that we can investigate them. In this particular video, I got a coin. This is a toonie, a Canadian toonie. This toonie is worth $2. Now, as a practice, as a mindfulness practice, what we're going to do is we're going to observe this toonie as it is, and we're not going to think about it. So as you're looking at the toonie, what'll happen is you'll have thoughts that say toonie, and then you're going to label this area of reality. You're going to label it, and then you're going to have you're going to have other sets of meanings that give context to what toonie even means. So you have to have a concept of money. You have to have a concept of worth, of value. You have to have a concept of metal. You have to have a concept of object versus subject. So even just the most basic process of observing a toonie, it's impossible to see what this toonie is in truth unless you're able to detach your concepts from your awareness. Whoops. I just dropped it on the floor. So no more toonies. Now, this process of observing reality for as it actually is absolutely essential, because the thoughts, their job is to serve your survival as a separate self. That's the purpose of the thoughts, is to provide conceptual context to your waking everyday experience. Now, if you were to spend an entire day without a single thought, which is only possible with very, very serious and very, very diligent meditation practice that involves different concentrations and awareness and labeling of the present moment. If you were able to do that, you would realize that being, the existence, the fact of existence, is the most fundamental thing that exists. It's just being, just pure being. And in this field, this phenomenal field that you call your life, there is no self in truth. If you look at pure being, there is no self. In order to think that you exist, you have to conceptualize. You have to think that you exist. Remember that when you were born, it took you a couple years of your life to even realize that you exist. So that means for the first 2 years of your life, let's say, you would look in the mirror and you weren't able to recognize yourself as an ego. That's because being and consciousness doesn't require a self, a separate ego self. The separate ego self is like an additional layer on the pure truth of being. So notice how the development of an ego, this is a conceptual development. And this development the existence of reality has nothing to do with what you think you are as a human being, as a self with a name. My name is Adam, and I am 19 years old, and I have certain ways of, I have an entire life story, I have an entire context for what this life is. All of that context, that's concept, and that is taking us further away from the true nature of being. Now, the problem with this ego, with this separate self, is that this ego is the number one thing, the primary thing that prevents you from seeing reality clearly. This is what I talked about a lot in my last video, meta thinking, and in a lot of my videos actually, but Maslow talked about needy perception versus being perception. Now, needy perception is what 99% of the human population is doing, and what I'm doing for a majority of my day. Needy perception is seeing the world through the lens of the ego. And that lens is not true because the ego twists the world for its selfish purposes. So look, I'm going to grab another object here. Book. I got a book here. This is Conversations with God. This is one of my highest book recommendations. This book, I'm going to see it for what it can do for me. That's a needy perception. So book, just the fact that it's a book, that's me viewing the world from the perspective of the ego. But now let's move into being perception. This is more accurate perception. We're getting a lot closer to what reality actually is when we move into being perception. Now, when we see this book for what it is in truth, without any concepts obfuscating what we're seeing, we see, oh, this thing, what is it? It's literally just a series of passing phenomena. There's no separation between the series of phenomena that supposedly make up what I call my body and the series of passing phenomena that make up this book here. That's why mindfulness meditation practice is so essential. By the time, if you're watching this video, by the time it came out, I'll actually be on a Vipassana retreat, which is basically just 10 days of very extremely strict, never-ending mindfulness. So it's 10 days of meditation where you meditate basically 24 hours a day while you're sleeping, while you're shitting, while you're eating. It's all meditation practice. Now, as you can imagine, after 10 days of observing only the present moment, your actual conception of what you think reality is completely changes. You no longer think of you as a separate biological entity. Because after you observe the present moment closely, you start to see that you don't exist. Now, this is not an ideology. This is not a belief system. And this is not even a characteristic of Vipassana meditation exclusively. This is a characteristic of the present moment. And what Vipassana meditation is literally observing the present moment without selfish attachment. That's the whole point of all of Buddhism, of all of Hinduism, of all of every spiritual teaching, and of all of life. Is, are you able to observe the present moment without selfish attachment? If yes, then you will glimpse the supreme reality and you will live in eternal bliss because you will realize that you don't exist. And this is a beautiful realization because then you live in eternal bliss. Nothing can ruin your day if you don't exist because you're no longer attached to things. If someone comes and shits on your lawn, that's completely fine and it doesn't perturb you at all. Because you don't have a selfish attachment to things. So they who have conquered themselves, they live in peace. Alike in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, praise and blame. Because the self is the thing that separates reality and says yes to the good things and says no to the bad things, things that are bad for the self. Obviously, the whole notion of good and bad is what is relatively good for the survival of the self. So murder, you'll call that bad because that's not good for the self. And then a nice juicy apple that you eat, you'll call that good because it's good for the body and you think the body is the self. But the enlightened one, the illumined one who is established in the practice of meditation, they live in even mind, a state of equanimity, where the good things and the bad things don't sway them because they realize they are neither of them. And neither of them will ever affect their true nature, which is, it's not a word, it's not a concept, it is this. Okay, let's move into the next quote. This is the Buddha talking about the wise. The immature who know they are immature have little wisdom. But the immature who look on themselves as wise are utterly foolish. Now this is a big one because this goes back to my video, How to Acquire Wisdom, where I talk about the importance of intellectual humbleness. The second you think you know, you've already lost yourself. You already are lost. Because the most true thing about this present moment here is that I don't know what the fuck it is. What is this shit? What? There's like stuff going on. Like, how is there an experience at all? How am I talking? How is this even legible? Like, how are there words coming out? It makes absolutely no sense at all. It makes no sense. If you're being completely honest with yourself, totally honest, you will look at the present moment and tell yourself, I don't know what the fuck this shit is. What is this shit? I don't know. I don't know. And that's the most true thing we have, that we don't know. So this is another beautiful quote. As irrigators lead water to where they want, and as archers make their arrows straight, as carpenters carve wood, the wise shape their minds. Now this is from the Dhammapada. It's absolutely beautiful. If you want to live a life of wisdom, if you want to live a life of virtue, basically all you're going to have to put your attention on, what you're going to have to focus on the most, is the quality of your consciousness, the quality of your mind. How consistently are you aware of the present moment and of your true nature? For me personally, in my own experience, not very consistently. It's extremely difficult. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of practice and patience, which is why I take meditation practice so seriously, and why it makes me a little bit sad when people either say that meditation is pointless, or when they do meditate but they don't understand the full ramifications. Meditation practice is basically one of the most effective tools for shaping your mind. And if you haven't noticed, all of reality is your mind. That's what everything I'm saying here is alluding to. There is no reality outside of your mind. See my video, Is Life a Dream? For an extremely compelling case, if you're open-minded and are actually genuinely interested in discovering the true nature of reality. That video has an extremely compelling case for reality is all in your mind. This isn't an ideology. This isn't a belief system. This isn't something that I tell you and you take on as some sort of belief system. This is what you will see to be true, unequivocally true in your own direct experience, if you are willing to put in the work of the actual investigation of the present moment, which is entailed with mindfulness meditation practice, these contemplating exercises like looking at objects and seeing them to be not really an object, but just like, what is this? Removing the labels. And also psychedelics as well. Psychedelics help expanding your consciousness as well. So I got a couple other good quotes here. Oh, this is a beautiful one. Good thing I put a sticky here. One day's glimpse of the deathless state is better than 100 years of life without it. One day's glimpse of the Dharma is better than 100 years of life without it. Wow, this is very inspiring. One day's glimpse of the deathless state. The deathless state is the realization that there is no one to die. There never was. There never was a self in the first place. And when you realize this, you become immortal, because you always were immortal. Now, you are not the body. The body is not immortal. The body is a series of passing phenomena. But you, the eternal moment, the eternal present observer, who is not separate from that which is being observed, the fact of being, that is deathless and eternal, the fact of being. That thing always exists, but it's precisely not a thing. It's not any one thing. Again, I'd like to reiterate, this is not a belief system. This is something that is for you to grasp in your experience. This is what the enlightened sages have all grasped, which is why they use their words to point to the truth that is in your experience. The words themselves are not true. The Buddha said that the teaching, the Dharma, is like a raft. You can use the raft to get yourself to the other side of the bank, to the other side of the river, which represents the realization of no self, nirvana, liberation, enlightenment. You use the Dharma, which is the raft, to get to the other side of the river. But once you're there, once you're on the other side, you leave the raft, you let it go. You don't need it anymore because you're on the other side. The fool will take the raft and put it on his back and carry it around with him everywhere he goes. Say, oh, the Dharma is the one true way. This is the absolute truth. No. The words are a tool to point you in the direction, of observing your direct experience. And that is the only thing that they should be used for. One day's glimpse of the Dharma is better than 100 years of life without it. And this, what the Buddha or whoever wrote the Dhammapada, might have been one of those, I'm not sure, but whoever wrote it, what they mean is that a life is much more fruitful and a life is much more fulfilling when you realize your true nature. And living your life in the sleeping, unconscious state where you think everything matters and you think everything exists, this is fine. It's completely fine. In fact, it's necessary to help you evolve as a soul. But you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer as much as you do by being so attached to the world being a certain way. When it's sunny outside, you're so happy. But then when it's raining, you suffer and you're sad. Why? Because you're attached to external phenomena. You're attached to passing phenomena. I said this in my video, The Root Cause of All Suffering, which is a very good corollary to this one. Wei Wu Wei said, why do we suffer? Because 99.9% of what you do is for the self, and there isn't one. Glimpsing the deathless state is worth it, and I wish that for you. So it's kind of nice. Okay, so this is the last quote that I'm gonna leave you with, and I'm gonna wrap this video up. Don't run after pleasure and neglect the practice of meditation. If you forget the goal of life and get caught in the pleasures of the world, you will come to envy those who put meditation first. And again, this is another quote that I talk about in my video, The Root Cause of All Suffering. I was just going to quote it, but then I forgot how it starts. Don't run after pleasure and neglect the practice of meditation. So the root problem with running after pleasure, and if you haven't noticed, all of Western culture is in a spiral dynamic stage orange, which tends to be very hedonistic. And we genuinely believe that the world is physical and that when you die, when you as the body die, first of all, you're not the body, but when the body dies, it's just eternal blackness forever. So you might as well spend this lifetime just enjoying all of the pleasure that we possibly can, right? You just want to feel good as much as possible. Now, as I've realized when I was very young, I was a pleasure junkie. I really enjoyed playing thousands of hours of video games and watching hundreds of hours and probably thousands of hours of porn and smoking a lot of weed and all this kind of stuff. I realized that, oh, fuck. Seeking pleasure doesn't work. And even seeking success or seeking status or seeking achievement, this is cool and this is good. And I think it's important to strive after worldly achievement. But it's important to remember always in the back of your mind that everything is just a passing phenomenon. This too shall end. And when you're on your deathbed, you won't look back on your life and wish that you smoked more weed. Or you won't look back on your life and wish that you ate at more restaurants. What you're going to look back at is whether or not you smelled the roses, whether or not you enjoyed the present moment fully, warts and all. And that's why meditation practice is so important, because it's impossible to fully enjoy the present moment if we're always trying to chase after some pleasurable moment and run away from all of the bad things that we don't like in this present moment. That's why if you spend your whole life chasing after pleasure, you will come to envy those who put meditation first. Now, for a lot more details, check out my video, How Meditation Works. Check out my video, The Root Cause of All Suffering. I'm going to wrap this one up. This was a kind of an unstructured video. If you like these types of videos where I talk about meditation, where I talk about the goal of life, which is to raise your consciousness. And as you raise your consciousness, you raise your vibration, which involves you feeling better, you feeling more virtuous, you feeling more blissful, more joy, more love. You feel better. And it is good for you to feel good. I want you to feel good in your life. But the way to feel good is kind of counterintuitive. It doesn't involve chasing after sensory pleasures. It involves living a life of virtue, and especially being well established in meditation practice and raising your consciousness, which ironically involves a lot of temperance and resisting temporary pleasures. Because if indulging in sensory pleasure is taking away from your level of consciousness, then you're gonna be suffering a lot. So thank you so much for listening. Subscribe to this channel if you like to learn about meditation, if you like to learn about self-actualization, the goal of life, reaching your highest potential. If you stay tuned, I'm going to be sharing more tips, more inspirational videos like this one, more videos about metaphysics, that if you're interested in discovering the true nature of reality for yourself and not just believing what someone on the internet tells you, then stick with me and subscribe, like, and I'll catch you in the next one. Namaste. Oh my god, I just said namaste at the end of my video. I feel so new agey. Okay, have a good one.